Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun filled, action packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist, DT from Weather Risk, your captain of chaos, your colonel of confusion, and your commander of catastrophe. Let's talk about this week in weather. Now, I do need to advise you that I am still recovering from bronchitis, so I have to keep my voice down. And also, I have a cough drop to keep my coughing from becoming too strong here, so I know that kind of ruins the audio a little bit, but they have to make allowances for the current medical condition. Okay, so we will be talking about Thanksgiving week into mid-December. Now, last time we did the slide here, we showed this buildup of the cold air in Canada. So even though most of the country in early November was quite mild, we had a lot of buildup of extremely cold air in all of Canada, and that's exactly what has spilled southward. So the pattern began to change here. This is November 14th. We can see the very strong ridge here forming on the west coast. This thing right here, this ridge right here, and then there's your trough coming down the Midwest here. So and you can see the leading edge of the Arctic area, the cold front, and then we had the rainstorm which came through the east coast yesterday and the snow in the mountains. So but this is the pattern bringing the cold air in. Now this feature here, the west coast of North America, is actually known as the negative EPO. The Eastern Pacific Oscillation is building up into Alaska and across the poles. We can see more of it here on this slide. So notice here we have this huge omega block sending right over Alaska and northwest Canada. And you can see it is shaped by the letter omega because of the black line running around it. You can see the omega shape here. Oops. And then of course you have this monster trough here, which is this is for the 18th, 17th, 18th for Friday, Saturday, dominating the entire Midwest and the East Coast. And look at the lines coming out of Canada. Look at these lines, just very impressive. Now, eventually, the ridge, weakens a little bit, but it's still quite strong. So by the time we get to November 20th, which is, I guess, what, Sunday, we have this still very impressive trough swinging through the Midwest and the East Coast. Very impressive system here. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that, the temperatures showing up are really quite stunning for the middle of November with no snow on the ground in most of these areas. I'll show you what it looks like here. This here is a surface map. So this is from early this morning, and you can see here this is valid as of Friday. So we have this reinforcing cold front here. Look at this 1040, 1050 high in Idaho and Montana, and look at the howling north winds driving the cold air southward. So very impressive, tremendous lake effect snows. That's why, you see these west and southwest winds here. That's why National Weather Service has 2, 3, 4 feet of snow in the eastern Great Lake snow belts, because they're really going to get slammed here with these west or west southwest winds cutting across the lakes into northeast Ohio, the Pennsylvania Panhandle, western New York State, in and around Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And show you what the temperatures look like. Now again, this is with no snow on the ground. This is Saturday morning, November 19th, and you can see that west of the Appalachians and into New England, temperatures are in the teens, and some areas in the mountains in single digits. Now east of the Appalachians, New York City, Philly, Baltimore, Washington, Richmond, it's 25 to 30 degrees. But when you go west of the Appalachians, very impressive. And then here on the bottom, this is November 21. Again, you can see low to mid 20s here in the mid-Atlantic of Virginia for the first time, even into the coastal areas. And look at those temperatures in Vermont and New York, and single digits. Very impressive. So a lot of cold air. You don't see this all the time in mid-November. You just don't. You can't say this is normal, because it's not. This is an impressive cold shot. Now, by the time we get to Monday, the Arctic high is going to be centered right over Virginia. So the night from Sunday night into Monday morning will be a night of maximum radiational cooling with no clouds at all, and the temperatures escaping, and the heat of the day escaping into space. And so a very impressive cold shot here. And then once we get from Monday into Tuesday, temperatures will begin to recover a little bit. Now eventually what's going to happen is this high is going to move off the coast. You see, let me call up my arrow here so you can see it. This high here, this thing is going to move off the coast in this direction. That means you're going to be getting west and southwest winds bringing up the milder air. But there is a little bit of reinforcing front here that comes down. So as we approach the Thanksgiving holiday, we've gone from This type of jet stream pattern, look at the omega ridge here to the regular ridge on the west coast. Now to this one, still kind of an omega ridge here. So it is still lasting. But what happens is the Pacific jet kind of takes over a little bit. The deep trough is gone. So you have a split in the jet stream. You have the northern branch here coming out of Canada, along the U.S.-Canada border, around the upper low. You see the upper low here. Yeah, let me call it up so you can see what I'm saying. So there's the northern branch, see right here, okay? And this here is the southern branch, see that? So, and in between, not much is going on. Now what's going to happen is this energy here is going to really begin to amplify, develop here. Now this takes us to Wednesday night, November 23rd. So we have this big upper low in southeastern Canada. There's pulling down the cold air from Canada down the ridge here into the Great Lakes in New England. And there's this big system coming out of the Rockies into the Plain States. And that results in a significant Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving weekend, autumn low pressure system. This is the European model. From here Wednesday afternoon, you can see the trough. The trough here, it goes negative. You can clearly see it right here. It's going negative right along this line, like northwest to southeast. See that? Another one up here. Look at the huge block right here in Greenland. Massive blocking pattern. A nice ridge in California. So this is going to go negative. Now because it is along the Mississippi River, not on the East Coast, the low is going to be inland, well inland. This is not an East Coast winter storm. This is a Midwest low. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's the European model. Look at this sucker. Thursday night, Thanksgiving. Wow, 976 in western Michigan. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Now, this also is a very warm storm on the European. And look at the snow line is north of Lake Superior. And you have a lot of severe weather potential here in the southeastern states. I'm afraid Thanksgiving night, there could be severe weather, tornadoes, thunderstorms, hail, a lot of scary shit from Virginia down to Georgia and Alabama. I'm a little concerned about that. I think mostly the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, but we'll see. Maybe it won't show up. Maybe it'll just be regular storms and rain, but I'm a little concerned. And from there, the European model now takes the system on Friday, Black Friday, the shopping day. You can see this intense low, very slow, 970 millibars. Look at this monster, a monster, moving into Lake Huron, okay, in eastern Ontario, the secondary low in Maine, driving rain all of New England, not a hint of snow anywhere. Then behind it, look at these howling winds coming in behind this sucker. I try to draw it in here a little bit, as you can see it. Look at these winds coming down, pulling the cold air from Canada, wrapping it in, so the Arctic air comes racing back in for the weekend. So that's going to be interesting to see. And there's the next Arctic high coming down. And here it is now for day 10, November 26th, coming out of the weekend. This is Saturday, right, Thanksgiving weekend. You can see this system's now moved into central Quebec, Canada, and you have howling north winds driving the Arctic air southward. There's a 1036 high coming down from Manitoba and Saskatchewan, driving the front, and the cold air comes back in. So there you go. Look at these lines. Wow, very impressive. A lot of north winds just howling the cold air in from northern Canada. Okay, now this here is the European for day 10. This is the surface map. This here is the upper air map, so you can see it. Okay, here's the upper air map, surface map, upper air map. You see the big giant upper low here, and there it is, big giant surface reflection of it. All right, there's your original west coast. There's the block again. Look at this block, folks. This thing will not going away in northern Canada. That's going to be a real issue as we go later into December. Now the GFS is handling this differently. Remember what the Europeans are doing. Okay, blows it up in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and haces up to Chicago, St. Louis, and Michigan. The GFS is a little different. It's colder. It comes out of Oklahoma. There's a bigger high here on Thursday night, Thanksgiving. It's still a lot of rain from much of the Midwest, but there is some snow in Iowa, Nebraska, and Chicago. Then here in the bottom right, blow this up here. This is Friday afternoon after Thanksgiving. Driving rainstorm. Again, this would be a severe weather outbreak for the southeastern states, Virginia down to Georgia, maybe Kentucky. Then you have this band of heavy rain, and then north, New York State, New England getting pounded with a snowstorm. Northern Ohio, maybe northern Indiana, but really New York State and New England because of the cold high over Minnesota. Then after that, the system moves off the coast on the GFS, and it wraps up around, and you can see there is rain in Boston, maybe some sleet, and then central Pennsylvania, much of New York, interior New York State, northern New England, it's all snow. Rain and sleet changes over to snow even on the coast. Look at the howling winds pulling down the cold air, heavy snow showers in the Appalachians, the eastern Great Lakes, West Virginia, western Maryland, western Pennsylvania. That's a Saturday. So they both have it, but again, the difference is the GFS is a lot colder than the European. So and the main difference is that look how far again the European takes up into Michigan, the GFS takes it across the Midwest and then towards Pennsylvania near New Jersey. It does not take it up into the heart of the Great Lakes. So that's the main difference. Here's the GFS solution. You can see the trough is very deep along the East Coast. It's still progressive. You see the trough here. Let's compare that for 1 second. There's the trough in the European. You see how it's negatively tilted running from, I guess that would be Wisconsin to Alabama. See that? Okay. The GFS, the trough is neutral, running due north to south from Michigan to Georgia. So the surface low is going to be here to the east. And that's why that's why the low slides further to the east, and you end up getting more snow in New York State and New England and eastern Great Lakes. Meanwhile, we still have our friend, the blocking pattern. There it is right there again. This blocking pattern is still there, showing up on all models. There's your ridge. There's your next trough here in the Gulf of Alaska. There's the block right there. And the temperatures in week 2, you can see this is from Sunday till Sunday after Thanksgiving. From Sunday to Saturday, temperatures well below normal for the week. Now, when the system, if the European model is correct, there is going to be an initial surge of very warm air on Thanksgiving Day. Okay, but for the week, it'll be colder than normal. And then the same thing with the GFS. Okay, now let's talk about what happens after Thanksgiving. In order to do that, we have to talk about our favorite thing known as teleconnections. Now, teleconnections refer to climate anomalies being related to each other over large distances, hundreds, thousands of miles apart. Some teleconnections are seasonal, such as the La Nina or the El Nino, or the Pacific Decade Oscillation, or the AMO for the hurricane fanatics out there, Atlantic Meridional Oscillation, the Indian Ocean Dipole. They last for several months or a year. But also, when you're trying to figure out the next 2, 3, 4, or 5 weeks, which is known as subseasonal, the subseasonal forecast from week 2 to week 6, teleconnections are important. Now in North America, we have 4 of them. 2 of them are on the Atlantic side. You see the red line here? The Atlantic side, the Arctic Oscillation, the AO, and the NAO, North American Oscillation. When you think Arctic Oscillation, think polar vortex, weak or strong. When you think NAO, think Greenland block or Greenland low. On the Pacific side, the left-hand side of the red line, the EPO represents the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. Think low in the Northern Pacific, or in the other phase, a cross-polar flow bringing the Arctic air from Siberia into Canada. And then the PNA is the West Coast Ridge or West Coast Trough. That's it. Those are the 4 teleconnections. Now the reason why this is important is because, let me show you. In the La Nina, this is December and January. The top 3 maps are December, the bottom 2, 3 are January. On the left-hand side, when you have a La Nina, but the NAO is positive for December, January, February, or mostly positive. Look how warm it is. Look on the left-hand side. Look at this. This is December, this is January. Look how warm it is with the NAO positive. Now here, when the NAO is neutral, look what happens. You have some cold temperatures in New England, kind of near normal in Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and then it's warm in the southern states. And then January, it's warm in the southeastern states, cold up here. But when the NAO is negative for most of the winter, look what happens. It's an ice box. It's much, much colder. So these are all La Ninas, but this is La Nina with a negative NAO. That's La Nina with a positive NAO. See the difference? Negative NAO, positive NAO. Now, as we go further on in time, what can we see here? Let me take this up. Okay. So this here is the extended GFS, goes the next 35 days. We can see that the Arctic Oscillation is in fact going to go a negative here a little bit. Go into December. See all the dark green lines and blue lines? A lot strong signal here for negative. Then it goes kind of mishmash after December 10th. But right in this time frame, there's indications of negative Arctic oscillation. Similarly, if we look at the NAO, we can see the same sort of thing. Again, right now, look, it's all neutral. November 16, 20, 25. But look when you get to the beginning of December, look at the strong negative signals showing up here. The greens and the blues. And then again, it goes kind of neutral towards the end. But right here in the first 10 days of December, there's strong signals of blocking developing here. Also, this is the November European Climate Model forecast for the NAO. And the black line is the neutral line. And you can see here the projections. Again, so you can call it up here. Look at December. See the negative signal here? The NAO? January is neutral. February is mild. At least that's what it looks like right now. Of course, it's a long way off. And then March is negative again. So this implies a particularly cold and stormy December, near normal January, mild February, and then maybe stormy again March. Okay, so this is supportive of the NAO idea, which is why I'm concerned about the winter if we go with a sustained NAO. Okay, let's talk about the MJO here for the next. It gives us an idea of the next 2 or 3 weeks. So here on the left we have the GFS. The upper right's the European. Bottom one is the extended GFS. And call my arrow here so you can see it. So notice what it does here. Here we are on the edge of phase 5 and 6. It comes up, goes into phase 6 and phase 7 by the end of November. It looks like it's headed into phase 8. You see that? See the lines will look like they're headed to phase 8? Phase 7, phase 8, end of November. This here is the European. Same sort of thing. Look at the red line, the blue line. And November 30th, it's in phase 7, headed towards phase 8, it looks like. And the extended GFS, the same sort of thing. Red line, phase 5, 6, and then phase 7, end of November, it looks like it's headed for phase 8. Well, what does that mean? Well, this is kind of a blob pattern. This is November phase 7. It's a very ordinary pattern. It's a split flow in the pattern. And there's some blocking in northern Canada. It's kind of stormy, but it's not particularly cold. But when you go into December phase 7, if we go into that, then you see a very different pattern. You see more blocking showing up, a very amplified west coast ridge. Still have a southeast ridge here as well, but a much bigger upper low in eastern Canada. And if we go into phase 8 in December in La Nina, well, this is a snowstorm pattern. You have a very big split flow in the jet stream right here. And you have this huge negative anomaly blocking up in here. Big negative trough on the east coast. This is a snowstorm pattern, if it's correct. We don't know if it's correct. I'm just saying it would be. Now, going beyond that, this here is the GFS from this morning, early on this Wednesday morning. Now, this is for November 29th. Now, notice it does have some blocking here in Greenland, the trough here right along off the southeast coast of Canada and on the west coast. But there's a ridge here in the Midwest. So it's better. It's not a blowtorch, but it's not a cold pattern. And November, it just isn't. But the updated version, you see what's going to happen is as the weather models see more and more of this blocking, this whole thing is going to change as the Greenland block and the Arctic oscillating goes negative. Let me show you what I mean. This here is the afternoon European. This is a very different looking map. Morning GFS, November 29th, European. GFS, European. First, we can see there is a trough now in the eastern United States. The blocking is much more pronounced in Hudson's Bay and in Canada. And there's much less ridging across the southern states. Not surprisingly, temperature anomalies end in November going into December are still pretty cold, especially in New England down the mid-Atlantic. I mean, not extreme, but fairly cold. The other thing is the extended GFS yesterday came out with this. Now, this is woof. You have a very strong snowstorm potential. Now, this is December 7th, okay? It's a long way out. So just bear with me for 1 second, all right? We have a very pronounced block in Greenland and Baffin Island. Very pronounced. A strong ridge on the west coast, a moderate trough here, and clearly some sort of low pressure negative anomaly in the mid-Atlantic. This has potential. This has potential. Well, now, I don't know if it'll be cold enough on the coast, but certainly inland. This has got potential for an early season significant snowstorm in the first week of December. Something to watch for. Moreover, this thing has been showing up for a while. This is the CFS from a couple of weeks ago, November 3rd, and it also is showing something in the first, around December 7th or 8th. So again, and then finally, this here, well, not quite finally, but this here is the CFS. And this is from this afternoon. And you can see, look at the, again, this is strong blocking. That red is big, strong blocking. So what happens is the jet stream is split and it's forced to go underneath it, and there's some kind of low pressure here in the mid-Atlantic area. I'm telling you, there's something going on here during the first week of December. A lot of strong signals. The other thing to point out is this. This is last year. This is the measuring of the winds on the polar vortex, the stratospheric polar vortex, SPV. We'll just call it the polar vortex. And notice what happened here. This covered the time frame. You look at the date here. This is I guess this would be November of 20 to December, late December of 2020. Right. So you can see November, December 2 years ago. What happened is that the polar vortex. Look at the values here. Call it up. You can see it. Okay, 40 and 45. You see what happens? So the thick black line is the mean. You can see that, and you have a large signal right here above 40 and 45, which is a very strong value. And the red line here is you can see the median there. So all this is compacted way above the red line. And the blue line is the mean of the thick blue line is the mean of the blue. But this is the 90th. This is the mean in here, the median. Now this is from last winter, and again we can clearly see that throughout the entire winter that, oops, let me call it up again, you can see it. Look where the winds were. Okay, this is November 16th of last year, a year ago right now. And then this is December and mid-December, and you can see it was constantly, look at the black line, the mean, 45 and 50, 40 and 45. See that way up here as we went to December. The very strong polar vortex, which meant a positive Arctic oscillation. But look at ours, the latest signal here from the European Weekly. Notice that the signal here, again, you can see the thick red line, the blue line, is at 30. Not 45 or 50, 30. This is a very weak looking polar vortex. And this indicates a much higher chance of negative AO or Arctic oscillation, which means potentially more winter weather and cold and snow in December. And then other point here, this is my second to final slide. This again, this is from the European folks and the weeklies. And here they look at the Atlantic pattern. So we have the blue color represents, and this goes from November 15th. Look at the scale here in the bottom. November 15th all the way to December 28th. Okay, next 45 days. So the green is negative NAO. And the red is blocking the Arctic oscillation going negative. See that? The blue is a positive NAO, which means a low in Greenland, which is not what you want if you like winter weather. And then there's the Atlantic ridge, which is also not what you want for Eastern US weather. So we're looking at the reds and the greens, So look how dominating it is right through the whole month of December. All kinds of strong blocking signal here. So I'm telling you, December's got possibilities, folks. I'm telling you. Okay. So, key points here. We had a record strong negative EPO. So the first true Arctic air mass of the season in mid-November. It has. We're being hit by it now. There was a probable significant November 24-25 major Eastern U.S. low, and in the Southeast U.S. maybe a severe weather outbreak. Now the earlier, all the models showed November 25 to 30th would be kind of mild, but the new data shows, when that low goes up into Eastern Canada, it's going to pull down the cold air and bring the cold air back into the Eastern U.S. before the month is out. There is a possible severe negative NAO showing from December 1st to December 10th, or maybe even longer. Definitely a signal for that we've talked about. And also the potential for phase 8 into the MJO. Now, if we go have a negative NAO, North American oscillation, if the Greenland block appears, and we go into phase 8 in the MJO, the snow dogs will howl. They will howl in the eastern United States. Okay? And finally, it looks like the polar vortex stays really weak on the European weeklies, the CFS, the extended GFS, and there's a lot of blocking which lasts at least until the mid-December, if not the whole month. Again, we don't know that yet for a fact, but that's what it looks like. Anyway, that's the presentation. Hopefully this was a good one for you. You enjoyed it. You learned a lot. We'll see what happens. This is meteorologist DT for Weather Risk. I'll see you over on the Twitter page and over on the Facebook page and on the website.